Hey friends, Dave Paulides, CanAm Missing Project Copyrighted Edition for a video channel. Thanks for being here. Huck asked for a mental health day today, so because I don't want her to go union on me, I gave her the day off, so she's out prancing around the garden. It's a missing person segment. Got two cases for you. But before we get into that, we oftentimes here talk about things that they call mentally ill people here. We talk about visions, psychics. Many of you say, Dave, don't listen to psychics, it's the devil talking. Well, my favorite magazine, and I mean this 100%, Nexus, written by my friend Duncan Rhodes. Duncan's a genius. And he penned an article, and this isn't pro-politics one way or the other. It involves a vision somebody had. And I'm going to read you this article. I want you to think. Tell me what comes to mind. It says, as 2024 marched towards the U.S. presidential election, more than one pundit speculated that if the deep state's courts didn't stop Trump's new rise in the presidency, then an assassination would be likely. But one man, Brandon Briggs, a devout Christian, was shown in a vision months earlier, Trump on stage being shot, falling to his knees, and rising with blood across his face. Sometime later, on March 15, 2024, Brandon mentioned his vision during a panel discussion on solar eclipses and how that fitted into Christian prophecy. The video on the panel can be found on YouTube, /EY0 Queen Victor Zebra George 8 / v big U. Here's an edited extraction of what was said. The Lord told me, he said, I am not done with America. He said there's going to be a new wave of patriotism coming out, and whenever I saw Trump, saw a red wave coming out of Michigan and then to Oklahoma, and they were bringing forth a new patriotism across the nation. And it just started spreading like fire. I saw Trump rising up, and then I saw an attempt on his life. That this bullet flew by his ear, and it came so close to his head that it busted his eardrum, and I saw that he fell to his knees. I saw him winning the presidency through the Lord, showed me great persecution would come on him through the judges and the courts, and then there would be a great economy crash. And the Lord warned me about this. It would be a great dark time. And I saw Donald Trump praying in the Oval Office, and he was weeping before the Lord with his hands on his head. But he was weeping. And there were ministers and people. I don't know if they were senators or Congress people or whatever. I just saw them pacing back and forth inside the Oval Office. Quote, and the Lord said, do not call this judgment. It's not my judgment. It's a correction. There's a correction coming. Here's back to Duncan. Given the accuracy of Brandon's vision from God, I was intrigued to learn more about him and to see what other visions he might have had that have come true. Brandon presents as one of those rare Christians who are based on love instead of judgment. His YouTube channel, called Last Days, seems to have been a result of God telling Brandon to share the visions given to him, a lot of which go back to an all-night experience vision where God, Jesus, took Brandon and showed him the end times or the times of tribulation. This is one sobering all-night vision of the future, and I've heard more than my fair share of end-time narratives and predictions. It happened on 6th of July 2014, and it wasn't until 2021 that Brandon felt comfortable about putting it down on video and creating a YouTube channel. Even then, he didn't upload it and make it public until late 2023. You can see it for yourself on his channel. Brandon has had many visions over the past few years, some with specific details, others more general in nature. If I were to summarize the sequence of events that I've gleaned from watching most of them, they would occur early in October 2024 onwards, not necessarily in this order. Legal matters hinder Trump into the past election. Trump wins the election. A 911 type of world-changing event happens in America. A massive economic crash occurs in early 2025 after Trump is confirmed leader. NATO crosses Putin's red line and Russia bombs Poland. Europe with a type of neutron bomb, but it is not an atomic weapon. It's a new type of weapon that vaporizes people while leaving buildings standing. Men and women are drafted for war across the USA and Western Europe. Some sort of plague kills 350 million people globally. America is attacked from within by widely coordinated military units posing as illegal immigrants, shocking the entire nation. A massive earthquake occurs on the west coast of the USA. An asteroid strikes America. Talk of UFOs and aliens become normal in mainstream media. The tribulation starts with the disappearance of lots of people, including all the children up to around 14, 15 years of age. The public think aliens took them. Christians release it was a rapture and that they missed out. A couple things about this. First of all, if Brandon Briggs was that accurate, I am totally impressed. And you should be too, with this prediction about Trump being shot. You couldn't guess that one. Now, I haven't watched this channel because I trust Duncan 100% in his assessment. I always ask you guys, if it wasn't God that talked to Brandon Briggs, who was it? And why would you, as a being, tell him what was happening in the future? Was he supposed to go tell Trump and he didn't? And if that was part of what happened, then should we rely on the rest of what Brandon says as being true? I don't know. It's food for thought. And that's really what this show is about. Get you to think and get you to realize what's happening on the world around you. So, let's go on. Nexus Magazine. And I'm not kidding when I say it's the best magazine out there. And I mean that wholeheartedly because of the articles that Duncan gets to write for him. Superbly done. And I'm not getting paid to say that at all. First story has to do with a young man named Najib Monsif Jr., 20 years old, went missing September 23rd, 2021, just a couple years ago. He lived with his family in Scottsdale, Arizona. Just so you guys know, I'm going to be right next door to Scottsdale at MUFON Phoenix in February of 2025. Get your tickets now because it will sell out. I've sold out everyone I've gone to there lately. It's a great venue, and I will rock that house, trust me. So Najib, even though he was 20 years old, he had autism, and he thought like an 8-year-old. And I know it's hard to think back when you were 8 years old. What were you like? Think about an 8-year-old in school. How did they think? How did they rationalize things? So you can kind of think of his mindset. Family said all had rallied around Najib because he was depressed because it was in the middle of COVID. Lockdowns, couldn't see friends, couldn't go to school. Depressing times. I remember Ben got depressed about it as well. Well, on September 23rd, the early morning hours between 2 and 3 a.m., Najib vanished from the house. Family searched the neighborhood in the morning. He didn't have his phone with him. He didn't have really anything with him. No means to contact him. Family searched the neighborhood, called friends, family, everyone they knew. Later that morning, they called the Scottsdale Police Department and reported Najib as a missing person. Now, this wasn't handled like a normal 20-year-old search. I can tell you, with a normal 20-year-old disappearing in that neighborhood, there would not be a search. But because Najib had autism, the police handled it the right way. They took it very seriously. first did a search of the neighborhood. Then they walked around and they tried to find a neighbor who had a doorbell camera, because those will record somebody walking by the front of your house. And oddly, they didn't find anybody with any footage anywhere of Najib, which is bizarre. That's bizarre. Somebody who's walking down the sidewalk is going to get picked up by a camera if you walk a quarter mile. It's just the way it is. But they didn't find any. Now, during the search, they brought in a canine. The canine tracked his scent to an Albertsons supermarket a half mile from his home. This is Najib. Well, it tracks him to Albertson. Video cameras all over, and not one camera picks him up at Albertsons. Well, his family was putting up posters all over Scottsdale and the surrounding cities. The father continued to go onto the news and plead for information on it for his son. He said it was highly, highly unusual for his son to leave his home, let alone to leave the home in the middle of the night. He says he just doesn't understand. And in fact, the father said multiple times that he thought Najib had some help leaving, getting away. Maybe he had been with a bad element. But they searched computers for anything that he might have looked at, talked with. Nothing came up. Well, the search went on for a good long time. Nothing. Family kept searching. Nothing. And then the case, like almost all missing person cases, kind of just goes away. Sadly. Well, Najib disappeared on September 23rd, 2021. December 14th, 2021. Give or take 2 to 3 months later, there's a canal that runs through Mesa, Arizona. And that canal has a pump station every so far to keep the water moving. And at this one pump station, as garbage builds up there, a big claw comes out and scratches the bottom of the canal and pushes it all into a debris field. Well, they started to get a lot of debris, and one of the men went down to clean it out, and he found the remains of a person. Now, this location was 12 miles from Albertsons, and this canal is like a typical canal you'd see that's built in the last 40 years. It's got steep sides, it's got a fence all the way around it, it's got a tall fence. There's no way to easily to get in. And all they knew was that they had the remains of a body, and they didn't have a lot. So February 7th of the following year, the coroner comes out and says that the remains were skeletonized. The head and the hand were missing. And based on the separation in the vertebrae, they said that the person was probably dead when the head came off. The coroner stated that because there were so little remains left, they were unable to determine the cause of death. But a DNA match came back to Najib. So this is the area where there's a canal that follows the highway here. This is the 202. And the pump station was right near this intersection of Power Road and 202. Now this is Scottsdale over here. This is where he lived. It's about 11 or 12 miles to this point. Now what I find super fascinating is there's other disappearances in this greater Phoenix area of young men who have disappeared and have been found in the water in Tempe. So here's the 202. There's the water in Tempe. I find that suspicious. I find it highly suspicious. Well, the canal is fenced completely. There's no way a toddler is going to run into the canal. It's just not going to happen. Police said that he could have gone in between these two gates near this location. The father went there with a news crew and opened the gate, and the gate opens about this much. Father said, my son couldn't get through that. And my son didn't have the strength to go over the fence. I tend to believe the dad. Father then again reiterated that he thought there was foul play. And there's no doubt there is some foul play involved, but the type of foul play. Family offered a $100,000 reward for Najib's head. Now, I will tell you from all the forensic classes I took as a policeman, it is very, very, very difficult to remove a head from the neck or the spine. Very difficult. Now, maybe the claw in the canal hit it just right and knocked it off. Possible. Several people in that waterway in Tempe, I've documented in the past, that very similar to this. And another one in the desert where there was a hotel golf resort where a person was found in the water. And I always say this in case there's a family out there who has lost a loved one and doesn't quite understand where we're going. The best I can tell you is that your knowledge of any topic is based on your background and your interest. If you have someone in your family disappear under the circumstances that Najib disappeared, all of a sudden you're going to be reading a lot about water deaths. As I have done the research on them, in Missing 411, A Sobering Coincidence, this case would have made that book easily. Why? Because autism is one of the subcategories of people who disappear. That coupled with water, that coupled with unknown cause of death, that coupled with his inability to get inside the gated area, that coupled with 12 miles from home, I could go on and on. But I feel very sorry for his parents and his family. And there is suspicious circumstances in all of these cases. But it's really not the suspicious circumstances that most people would think. And you and I know the difference. All right. Next case. Involves a lady named Lyn Palmer, 71 years old. This is Lyn. She disappeared April 20th, 2018 at 4:45 in the afternoon. She lived in an area called Fall River Mills, California. And she lived with her husband of 20 years, Bob, and she was a retired hospice nurse. Let me stop you right there. See this lady right here? You look real close, you should see a halo above her head. Because hospice nursing is some of the hardest of all nursing. Watching somebody die and helping them and nursing them and comforting them when the end is near is something I could never do just because my mind couldn't handle it. But bless those nurses out there that can do this. Lyn was one. Well, she worked in a hospital as well, and she was a super social person. Her husband said everybody within 20 miles knew Lyn and loved Lyn because of what she did for the community. Well, once she retired, she helped open up a thrift store in the area. The idea behind the thrift store was to help hospice, people in hospice, pay their bills. That was the entire gist of the thrift store. Again, angelic behavior, okay? Now, Lynn was working at the thrift store, volunteering her time. And at the end of the day on April 20th, 2018, she comes home like she did every day and gets in at about 4:30 in the afternoon, 4:35. Bob's home, they greet each other. And Bob had been babysitting his daughter's dog. His daughter lived about 20 miles away. Well, she says hi, she drops her keys in her purse and her phone. And almost like every day, like clockwork, while they're babysitting the dog, she goes to the refrigerator, grabs a light beer, calls the dog. Dog's name was Lucy. And she says, Bob, we'll be back in a few minutes to take the dog out. Like clockwork, every day, same thing. Well, the dog was what's called a blue heeler. Good health. And Lucy didn't need to be on a leash. Lynn and Bob lived out in the wooded area of their city. Didn't live inside the city area. There were neighbors, but it wasn't like a neighborhood. Whenever Lynn did this, she was gone 10, 15 minutes and then would come back with Lucy. So let me first explain where this is at so you can help understand. This is Highway 5, that is the main route through California from north to south. This is Redding. This is Mount Shasta. And then just east of there, this is a town called Bernie, and this is where they lived. And they lived just outside of town to the south. I spent time as a youth all through this area, and we would always stay in that little town right there called Dunsmuir. Now, Dunsmuir, greatest little city in the world. I'm serious. The Sacramento River runs through Dunsmuir. I haven't been there in decades, but so many great days fishing on the Sacramento. Just from the bank, having great fun. As a youth, we'd go swimming. They used to have a hotel there called the Cave Springs Inn. I don't even know if it's still there. I just remembered that just now, sitting here. And that's where we'd always stay. Probably one of the cheapest hotels in the city. But man, we'd go up there with our aunt and uncles and our cousins, and we'd spend a week, and we would just have a blast. That's how, and my family imparted that on me, how to have fun on a vacation without spending a lot of money. And even as I got older, I went to Cave Springs, and I would go east to near Bernie and fish in that area as well. So their city, Fall River Mills, been through it many, many, many times. Lots of trees, lots of forests, beautiful. It's very hot there. So, one last map. This is their city. This is the area where she was lost in. Okay? And again, not a neighborhood. So, Lynn was gone for about 25 minutes. Highly unusual. And Bob started looking for her. Went out on the street, called her name, walked around, called her name, nothing. Got in his car, drove around, couldn't find her. 45 minutes later, Bob started calling neighbors. Nobody had seen her. And Bob had a friend that was a volunteer firefighter, and he asked if they would deploy to help search, and they did. And then later that night, he called the Shasta County Sheriff's and reported Lynn missing. Now, I want you to all see this. If you know anything about Lynn, call Shasta County Communications at that number and tell them what you know. So Shasta County comes out, they drive the neighborhood, the dirt roads, through the woods. They're not coming up with anything. They interview Bob. Lucy wasn't home. Lucy never came home either. Well, late that night, the deputy decided that they needed a full SAR call out the next day. And the next day came and they had a full deployment. First thing that arrived was the CHP helicopter. CHP has several of these, California Highway Patrol. They have several of these that are FLIR equipped, top of the line helicopters, great pilots. It's a great service to California that they have these. And they flew all day trying to find Lynn. Multiple canine teams deployed. They were given a scent of hers. They put in ground pounders. The mounted posse for the county arrived. And as the days went on, they had volunteers from 4 different counties arriving to search for Lynn. Everyone was really tired. End of day 4 came around, and they're all getting ready to leave. And who runs up to Bob and Lynn's front door? Lucy. Everyone was stunned. They're all watching her behavior. And they watched Lucy come into the house, get greeted by Bob, walks to its food and water bowl, and just took a short drink of water, and that was it. Something's up. Sorry, something's up. A dog gone 4 days would be ravishing that food. Well, the Shasta County Sheriff determines that at the end of day 5, they've searched all the area they can and they can't come up with anything more. So they call it. But the formal search is over. The family brought back a Mendocino County search dog and gave it Lynn's scent. And it trailed Lynn's scent to one of the dirt roads in the area and gave up. They didn't quite know what that meant. But the family did say they are 100% positive Lynn didn't get lost. She knows the area too well. Now, Lynn's listed as a missing person. It's not listed as a crime. But here's the questions I have on the case. Was Lucy with Lynn somewhere for 4 days? Think about that. This is another of a long list of cases that I tell you guys about where a person disappears with a dog. Sometimes the dog comes back, sometimes it doesn't. That's why we need somebody that can talk to dogs. We need the dog whisperer, and I'm being, you can laugh if you want, but can you imagine the crimes we could solve? Was Lucy fed for 4 days? Why wasn't Lucy hungry? And lastly, this is an advisory. When we're at a state park, national forest, we're around a campsite, kids are running around, idyllic place, no. At that campsite right next to you, you don't know. Could be a serial killer. Could be a rapist. Could be a child molester. Could be 3 campsites away watching your kids. Or watching you. I've had the same talk with friends, family, many times. When you go camping, you take the same practices as if you're in a big city. When Angie and I have gone places, I always give her a gun and said, hey, if you're going to the bathroom alone, take the gun. You don't know if you're going to see a bear or you're going to see a bad person. You be careful. Now, Lynn. It's weird to me how many times I tell you about superbly nice people that disappear. I'm sorry, Lynn was one of those people. She devoted her life to helping others. And she's gone. Could it have been something paranormal? Sure. Could it have been something criminal? Sure. But I find it incredibly odd that it's another case of a person missing with a dog. Sorry. But I appreciate you being here. And again, you can buy my books at NA, like North America, nabigfootsearch.com. You can watch our 3 movies online on Tubi, Tubi, Missing 411, Missing 411 The Hunted, Missing 411 The UFO Connection. And friends, be kind to each other. Life's too short. Kindness costs you nothing. Paulides out.